The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the show. Great stuff to talk about today. We're going to have a great interview about Bradley Manning and where is he, when is his trial, what is he being charged with, what's his likely jail time if he is convicted. All that stuff is coming up. We're also going to talk about some incredible Fox News lies that have been going on. And we will also show you the incredible pictures that were hacked from George W. Bush, including some of his paintings. George W. Bush paints, Lewis.
Oh, God.
And we've got the pictures. But first, let's get into a few other things. Welcome to everyone watching from the Too Informed to Vote Republican page, the I Love It When I Wake Up in the Morning and Barack Obama is President Facebook page, and the We Survive Bush, You'll Survive Obama Facebook page, joining our live stream. You know, a lot of people don't know we're live on YouTube Monday through Thursday, Lewis.
Yeah. It's good to know. Yeah.
But they should know. 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific.
You get a step. You're a step ahead of everyone if you watch the live stream.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So let's start with the Christopher Dorner, ex-Los Angeles policeman story. This story has been blowing up over the weekend. Authorities have now posted $1 million reward for ex-LAPD officer Christopher Dorner. He is believed to be, well, number one, he is known to be heavily armed. He is believed to be holed up in the wilderness of California's San Bernardino Mountains, about 80 miles east of Los Angeles. LAPD said that they put together the reward raised in part from private donations, as well as police unions and business contributions, and it is the biggest sum ever offered in Southern California for a criminal investigation, for a manhunt. And it's interesting to me, there's so many aspects of the story that are interesting. Number one is that a lot of individuals believe that the media coverage of Christopher Dorner is different than that of other shooters because of some of the parts of his manifesto, which some say are more liberal and that therefore it is being not discussed. But I look through the whole thing and it's mostly anti-government stuff, and there's a couple, I think there's a mention of Anonymous that's a positive mention, and some people are saying, well, that proves that this guy is some kind of liberal. This is an individual who's clearly mentally ill, clearly is also incredibly resentful from his manifesto of how he was treated and how his employment wrapped up with LAPD. And to say that to politicize something like this when you have someone at large who poses such a danger seems weird to me. We'll have plenty of time to figure out what were his influences, and it will be interesting, no question about it. But I don't really know that there's, again, immediately people jumping to conspiracies. This isn't being covered because of this media conspiracy. And the Jews did this, so therefore this is the narrative on Chris Dorner. I mean, what are we talking about here, you know?
I don't know. There doesn't seem to be much evidence as to his tendencies. Of course, usually when you think of a military man, what do you think? You think right wing, probably, but.
Well, the majority of his, well, I don't know about that, you know, because it is a misconception that the military overwhelmingly supported Mitt Romney. That wasn't the case.
But yeah, I know. They overwhelmingly supported Obama. But, 8 years ago, it was a different story.
Different story 8 years ago. The reality is most of the manifesto is very, very war and violence centered, talking about bringing warfare to the Los Angeles Police Department and, quote, utilizing every bit of small arms training, demolition, ordnance, and survival training I've been given. And he says he has shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles, with which he could knock out helicopters if they try to pursue him with helicopters. I don't really know how this is going to end. We have to assume eventually he will be captured. The question is, will he be killing more people before that takes place?
Right. I don't know. It sounds like this guy thinks he's Rambo. I mean, and does it make sense to organize this massive manhunt for someone who you believe is in the wilderness? I mean, or do you just wait for him to do something stupid in a public area
and draw attention back to himself? I don't know. I don't know what is protocol. What we do know is that in pursuit of Christopher Dorner, the Los Angeles Police Department has done a lot of bizarre stuff that's making some people ask questions, which I will relay to you. The stories are as follows. There are two different incidents here. One is Maggie Carranza, who's 47 years old, her mother, 71-year-old Emma Hernandez, who is being represented by attorney Christopher Driscoll, who says that it is 100% clear that the LAPD had no idea who was in the vehicle and just lit it up. This is, of course, referencing the incident where LAPD thought that they had a description of the suspect's vehicle and that they had found a vehicle that matched that description, and that they essentially started shooting at it. And the argument here is that the LAPD had no idea who was in the car. The car may have matched the description, but they had absolutely no idea who was in the vehicle, and that this is just completely outrageous. I'm sure we will see lawsuits. I'm sure we will see all sorts of stuff. Another similar incident involves David Perdue, who was on his way to sneak in some surfing before work on Thursday morning. When police flagged him down, they asked, "Who are you? Where are you going?" And then they sent him on his way. Now, only seconds later, according to Perdue's attorney, a Torrance police cruiser slammed into his pickup truck. Officers opened fire. None of the bullets struck Perdue, fortunately. And police later explained that his pickup truck matched the description of the one belonging to Christopher Dorner, the ex-cop who they have been pursuing. The pickups were different makes and different colors. And of course, Perdue looks nothing like Dorner. He's several inches shorter, about 100 pounds lighter, and he's white, whereas here Dorner is black. So,
Yeah.
well, first of all, what do you think of this?
Well, I think in a situation like this, it becomes very clear that these police officers are not elite in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, that's one view.
Yeah.
Natan, what do you think?
Yeah, I have no idea what I think about this.
Well, let me throw out the alternate idea, which is this, that shooting at women in the truck and then shooting at this other individual without even really knowing that this is the guy that you're looking for, to some people, it suggests that police want to silence Dorner for some reasons that are unknown at this point. In other words, that there has to be more to it for police to be shooting a truck from the back 30 times in a rush to kill whoever is inside before even engaging the fact that engaging who's inside, which happens to be two women. There must be some other reason we don't know about why this guy speaking out is something LAPD doesn't want. It's very conspiratorial, though, because I imagine, what else could it be? He's already said why he thinks LAPD mishandled his employment there. What else could there really be that isn't in his manifesto?
Yeah. I mean, he did speak of corruption, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a pretty broad term. Maybe things were as crazy as he claims they were. Maybe they do want to silence him, but open fire on a different make, different color truck with
doesn't make sense.
With a short, thin white guy in it.
Something about it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, even though it's very clear that these cops are not elites in any way, this still seems out of the ordinary, even for a completely paranoid cop going on a manhunt.
Exactly. Even by that standard, which is an unfortunate standard that we are now familiar with, it still seems off. Now, here's the other thing. Let's address very quickly, guys. There are some groups that are popping up on Facebook that support Chris Dorner, okay? That they say he's doing the right thing because the only way to get corruption out of LAPD is to start taking lives. I completely reject that. I have a huge problem with police corruption. We cover it on this program all the time. What else? I mean, it's a problem we're aware of, and we don't shy away from it. In fact, we're often criticized for being too hard on so-called police corruption when sometimes it's just stupidity. It's not corruption, it's just stupidity or ignorance. But how is going out there with this weaponry and shooting at police officers, if you think, well, it's just going to shake things up and make the department change? I don't follow the logic of how that would lead to less corruption. I simply don't.
Yeah, can't you just call the FBI?
Well, no, I mean, you can't, because we know about how these internal affairs things go. But Natan, do you understand what I'm saying? Even if you agree that we need to solve the corruption issue, how is one guy, a former LAPD officer, shooting up police going to really solve corruption?
It seems to me like the only way to get at police corruption, or really any major issue that's going on, is to get a broad base of public support. And it seems like armed conflict is not the way to get broad public support.
No.
If anything, I would support protests, civil disobedience, lobbying Congress, but definitely not, or state and local government too. But definitely not, fighting with arms against quote unquote tyranny or anything along those lines.
Very curious to see how this turns out, though.
Yeah, same here. Pope Benedict has announced he is resigning. This is the first papal resignation in about 600 years. He is currently 85 years old. His resignation letter said a few different things, including, after having repeatedly examined my conscience before God, I have come to the certainty that my strengths, due to an advanced age, are no longer suited to an adequate exercise of the Petrine ministry. Then it was followed up with a very hastily arranged news conference where Vatican spokesman Federico Lombardi said, the Pope did catch us a bit by surprise, and we should have a new Pope for Easter. So I have a number of thoughts on this. I understand the advanced age and that some say he has really deteriorated, but it's common that popes advance in age and deteriorate, but that they stay until they pass away.
Right.
So what else may be going on here? I mean, let's just look at it at face value. What better time to get out of there than in the midst of countless child pedophilia cover-ups, less people considering themselves practicing Catholics, less weddings done in through the Catholic Church. I mean, the Catholic Church is an institution in significant decline, and maybe he just wants out. And what a better, what could be a better time to get out than now and just let someone else deal with the shrapnel?
Pretty convenient, considering the organization. It sounds like if anything even crazier were to go down or be discovered, he pretty much would not be, I don't know, held accountable. And at his age, I mean, what are you really going to do anyway?
Yeah, and the other thing is, we've talked on this show so much about not only the cover-ups of child molesters in the Catholic Church, but also the incredible anti-gay sentiment there. And every time we have Pope-related news, you turn on the news and you just see the Pope. He's wearing these ornate purple capes and the jeweled hats and red slippers like the ones in Wizard of Oz. And he's telling people it's wrong to be gay. It's just a funny visual. It's just a really, really funny visual.
Yeah, there are some funny things about the church, but in general, it's a terrible. There are terrible things that are going on.
There are a lot of terrible things.
And I don't know. I wish it didn't exist at all.
Could we get a liberal pope next? And do we care? Or is this an institution that is just going to keep declining and declining?
No, there will not be the type of pope you're looking for. I mean, once you get...
the type of pope I'm looking for.
the type of pope you'd hope would...
The Jewish pope.
I mean, come on, they weed people out. When you get to the top of this organization, you have to assume that everyone is pretty much on the same page.
Yeah, if you get that high up, you probably are.
Yeah.
And also a lot of higher-ups in the Catholic Church are gay. We have a friend who has firsthand knowledge of a lot of homosexuality in the church that is essentially just covered up, and that's what it is.
Does not surprise me at all.
More Americans have died from domestic gunfire than all wars in U.S. history. This was a comment initially made by PBS commentator Mark Shields, and he said this on December 21st, 2012, which was a week after the Sandy Hook shootings. He was on the PBS NewsHour with Judy Woodruff and Mark Gerson. And on that, he said, Judy, the reality is, and it's a terrible reality, since Robert Kennedy died in the Ambassador Hotel on June 4th, 1968, more Americans have died from gunfire than died in all the wars in this country's history, from the Revolutionary War through the Civil War, World War I, II, in those 43 years alone. So PolitiFact, which is a known Pulitzer Prize-winning and fact-checking website, decided, let's investigate this, and they've ascertained that it is in fact true. From 1968 through 2011, 1.384 million people have died as a result of guns. Now, these numbers, if you look at them, are different than gun-related murders, right? So, for example, in 2011, gun-related murders were 11,000, but there were 30-something thousand people who died because of guns, and that includes suicides, accidents, and things which are not considered murders. War deaths, starting with the Revolutionary War, 1.171 million. So, incredible, Lewis, that 200,000 more people have died in the last 40 years from guns than in the entire history of this country in all the wars that have been fought.
Maybe we should just keep them around. It seems like they're actually a pretty good method of population control.
What do you think of that, Natan? I mean, what do you think when you see these numbers?
Well, obviously, there's a totally disproportionate amount of gun deaths given the first world status of this country. On the other hand, it should be mentioned that the population of the country before, in revolutionary times and through the Civil War and through the first half of the 20th century, was so much lower than it has been since 1968 that even if a very high percentage of people were killed, it's going to be a lower absolute number. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't a huge, unacceptable number, but we should probably put it in some perspective.
We should put it in some perspective, but it is still a very scary figure to realize that this is the reality today.
Yeah, and I still think it's more shocking to compare just the amount of gun deaths and gun crimes to other first world countries.
As long as you do it per capita, because otherwise people get mixed up in population differences.
Per capita, and I think that is even more shocking than this.
Let me make a book recommendation to you, made possible in part by A Fashion of Bastards by Joanna Louise Johnson, the genre-busting environmental intrigue story that has readers asking, could it be true? So I'm going to recommend a book that is a very good and entertaining story, but is also very, very relevant to something else that's going on today. The book is Dune by Frank Herbert, and I'm a big fan of this book, although I have not read any of the others. There's so many books in the series. I've only read the original Dune. It's a good story. It's an entertaining story, but it has a climate change and inequality component when it comes to natural resources. In the story takes place on the planet Arrakis, which has very, very little water. So actually, water needs to be managed. There are water masters. Water is kept such close control of. People are rationed on water. Everybody's skin is dry all the time because they are on such tight water rations. And it really brings up a lot of interesting questions about climate and natural resources going forward. And that's really the lens where I read a lot of it through. So it's an entertaining story, but also think about the climate change and natural resource discussions and components that are in there, because it is pretty interesting stuff, Lewis.
Good recommendation.
Let's take a break. We will, of course, be having a great bonus show today, which you can get by going to davidpakman.com/membership. The number one way to support this program: become a David Pakman Show member. You'll support us, you'll get the bonus show and a bunch of other great benefits. Coming up next, some incredible Fox News lies. You're not going to want to miss this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back to the show. If you shop on Amazon at all, please go to our website, davidpakman.com. Click the black banner that links you to Amazon on the right side, and then just do your shopping. You add your stuff to your shopping cart, you check out. 7% of your purchase will be sent back to the David Pakman Show. We've got people buying everything from books to cereal to big screen TVs through this, Lewis, and it's a great free way to support our show. Otherwise, you can also become a David Pakman Show member, made possible in part by liberalbias.com. At liberalbias.com, they refuse to have theories and graphs and all of that type of stuff dictated by fact checkers. And you can find out how you too can free yourself from the oppression of liberal facts by visiting liberalbias.com. I want to say hi to a very special new member today. Special in that I don't fully understand his name. Not how to pronounce it. His name is Howard Bruce II. I just don't understand the difference between the second and junior. Isn't it the same thing?
Well, I mean, it might have started as junior. It might officially be the second. Junior is more like a nickname. Like, I think on the birth certificate, it's the second.
Oh, is that right?
But
I don't know about
there
that.
There might be a third. So junior doesn't really work anymore.
No, yeah. When you have
juniors.
the third, you've got the initial person, you've got junior, and then the third. That's not a big deal.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not really too sure about this. By the way, people now have been actually on their PayPal or Amazon accounts, which they used to sign up for membership, making an account with like a weird name, which I know is not some people's real names, just for me to say the names on the show. And we're going to start coming up on some of those soon. I know that these are not people's real names, but now it's become a thing to sign up under some kind of weird name, just so I say it.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I'll do what I can. Incredible Fox News stories from over the weekend. Fox News getting caught straight up lying, saying in a segment where they wanted to make it seem like solar power is just not really going to get going, they started saying solar power won't work in America because it's just not sunny like in Germany. So first we have Gretchen Carlson kind of saying, hey, the industry's future doesn't look too good. Let's listen to that first, Lewis, and then we'll skip forward to really the key point. Take a listen.
into solar power production. Well, today the industry's future looks dim as investments into green energy are beginning now to dry up.
Oh, she just sounds so sad, a very contrite and sad-sounding Gretchen Carlson. Let's now go to the key point that people are just laughing hysterically at because it is just such nonsense that this expert says the following. Listen to this. Brace yourselves. Not safe for children, this type of nonsense. It's very, very damaging to children who are still forming opinions about science.
Then they start to cut prices again, and then we start to throw more money. That's not a viable business solution.
What was Germany doing correct? Are they just a smaller country that made it more feasible?
They're a smaller country, and they've got lots of sun, right? They've got a lot more sun than we do. I mean, the problem is it's a cloudy day and it's raining. You're not going to have it. I mean, this nation is vast and beautiful in its makeup. In California, it's a great solution. Here on the East Coast, it's just not going to work. So you
my. This is just incredible. I mean, how this is a channel that calls itself a news channel, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, why hasn't anyone thought of that before? Why wouldn't you think that some scientist somewhere would have noticed that the East Coast is less sunny than Central Europe and therefore incapable of producing solar power, just can't do it at all? Well, let's take a look at the map and see actually what the reality is. So this map here that you see is basically a map measuring sunlight and measuring the intensity of sunlight and the annual averages that can be collected. And as you can see, on the bottom right of the image, that's Germany. And you can see from the color coding that the sunlight in Germany is very, very close, slightly more than the sunlight in where, Lewis? In Alaska. In Alaska. Exactly right. And if you compare most of the U.S., with the exception of what? With the exception of the northwest tip of the U.S., which has less sun, and it starts to go in those same directions as Germany, we've got a ton of sun here. And compared, just for comparison's sake, if you look at Spain, which is on the Iberian Peninsula in southwestern Europe, we have, in a lot of the country, actually even more sunlight than there. So it must be fun being Fox News and actually producing nonsense programming, right? Imagine sitting around and saying, how about this? We'll just say that solar power won't work here because it's just not sunny enough like it is in Germany. What the hell? They'll eat it right up. And it basically happens.
They will go to any length to just keep corporate profits high, I guess.
Right.
I mean, that's really the only objective I can think of.
Yeah, and I could just feel my IQ points dropping as I watched this. After I watched this, I had to read some poetry to recover the 2 IQ points I lost from watching the story.
Scour over the dictionary for a little while.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Another Fox News story, which is pretty interesting. Fox News decides to run a story about traditional marriage and how traditional marriage is important. Blah, blah, blah. And they put this picture up as part of the story. What's the problem? This is a lesbian wedding picture. This is 2 women here getting married. Apparently, Fox News didn't notice this. And it was an article about traditional gender roles in marriage. Now, the argument could be made, well, they deliberately put this picture up to show what traditional marriage is not. Does anybody believe that that's what happened?
It's possible, but I doubt it. I mean, I don't think they would put this picture up for children to see. Because,
exactly. Exactly. This is actually a photo of same-sex couple Leela MacArthur and Stephanie Figuerel from Anchorage, Alaska. It's an AP photo that was used in the Huffington Post article about romance around the world. Any day, we're going to find out that Fox News is associated with The Onion, right?
It seems to be headed in that direction.
This is essentially an Onion story.
You know,
isn't The Onion an affiliate?
There's something I don't get about this, which is everyone just assumes that Fox made a mistake. But it's like, for me, people like the staff at Fox and right-wing people in general who have anti-gay positions in general are probably the type of person, if you look at the picture, that couldn't tell that the groom here with the suit is a woman.
Right. No, I agree. That's the point.
Yeah. But not that they just made a clumsy mistake. Oh, we just put this
put a
picture
gay
up.
marriage
They
picture. No,
actually
I think they
didn't know
put
what
this
they were
picture
looking at.
up not realizing that that's a woman. That's what,
or the person responsible for putting up this picture wanted to have a little fun.
and has an incredible sense of humor.
Yeah.
We may have found the one person at Fox News who has a sense for satire and parody.
We found the Manchurian candidate at Fox.
Amazing story.
Yeah.
So a tough weekend for Fox News. Here's something really, really interesting. UC Irvine professors Stephen Frenda, Eric Knowles, and Elizabeth Loftus, in partnership with William Salatan from the Slate Group, did a study which is published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, which brought in people. They brought over 5,000 participants, and they were asked their memories about 3 true political events. But in there, they were also asked their memories about 1 of 5 fabricated political events. So I might bring you in, Lewis, and I'd say, tell me what you remember from 9/11. Tell me what you remember from Winter Storm Nemo. What do you remember from Hurricane Katrina? And what do you remember from that time that George W. Bush was involved in a gay affair with the Saudi prince whose hand he was holding in that picture?
Yeah.
And people react, right? When it was individuals who were conservatives, they were more likely to remember a false story that involved Barack Obama being portrayed negatively. And when it was liberals, they were more likely to believe a false story about Republicans being portrayed negatively. However, this is the statistic. This is the incredible statistic. 50% of the study's participants remembered the fabricated political event, and 27% remember having seen specific media coverage about that event. Remember, the event did not happen. Did not happen. So the events that were used were conservatives were very likely, were more likely to falsely remember Barack Obama shaking hands with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Never happened. Liberals were more likely to remember George W. Bush vacationing with a baseball celebrity right after Hurricane Katrina. So this is just, it's fascinating. Now, we have to take into consideration one thing. Is it possible that the numbers are skewed because some people really didn't remember the event, but didn't want to appear uninformed, so they said they remembered the event? Do we have to account for that, guys?
I'm sure that would make up for a certain percentage of this, but we know that in similar studies where someone, a childhood photo of someone is photoshopped into another picture somewhere where they've never been, when asked if they remember this day, this event, where they were, they will form fake memories around it. So this is a common thing.
What do you think of this, Natan? I think this is incredible.
Well, look, there's a long list of studies that are confirming this idea that people can remember things that didn't happen. Because a few months ago, if you remember, there was a poll done on fiscal cliff deals or maybe even just a budget deal. And they asked people to tell them whether they were familiar with different plans. And they asked, Simpson Bowles and, McCain, whatever. And they included one that didn't exist. It was as ridiculous as saying, are you familiar with the Pakman Motamedi plan for the budget?
Right.
And 25% of people answered that they were familiar with that. So there's no reason to answer that way to show that you don't know. You could have just said, no, you're not familiar with that one, but you are familiar with the other ones.
Right.
But there you go.
Absolutely. So what I'm saying, I guess, is because of how this one was done, maybe the number isn't quite 50%. Maybe it's a little bit lower, but still incredible numbers.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right, let's take a break. Facebook.com/David Pakman Show. Consider a David Pakman Show hoodie, zip-up hoodie, or t-shirt, all made from 100% recycled materials. Find out more at davidpakman.com/gear. We will take a break. Next, what is happening with Bradley Manning? I want to know. You should want to know also. Stay with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Joining me is Kevin Gostola. He's a journalist for FireDogLake.com. He's been covering the WikiLeaks story, Bradley Manning, and secrecy, et cetera, et cetera. Kevin, I think a good place to start is, what is the status of Bradley Manning today? Where is he? What is his legal status, et cetera?
Well, currently he's being held at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. The status is that we have a trial date for the beginning of June. Right now on the calendar, the next hearing, he's been having regular motion hearings just about every month, which I've been covering at Fort Meade, Maryland, where they've been having the court-martial proceedings. And the next motion hearing is scheduled for the end of February through to March 1st. And what we expect to hear at that hearing is a ruling on the speedy trial motion that the defense filed.
And who's representing him?
His lawyer's name is David Coombs. He's a civilian lawyer. He has a background in the military, but he's no longer serving in the military. And then Manning has a couple other military trial counsel defense lawyers that are representing him.
What was the basis for the decision to move Bradley Manning from Quantico to Kansas?
This really happened because there was a lot of media attention and outrage about how people believed he was being treated at Quantico. We've now had a judge rule that he was unlawfully punished when he was held at the Quantico Marine Brig. And there was a major hearing at the end of November, the beginning of December, where Bradley Manning himself actually testified. And we had people from the whole chain of command at Quantico come and testify about how they handled Bradley, because the government had a burden to show that they had a good reason for the way that they treated him. And in the end, the judge found that he should be awarded 112 days sentencing credit. That's not a lot, really, when you think about the fact that he could be sentenced to life in prison without parole. But she recognized that there was unlawful punishment.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Gets us into the next question, which is, when we hear reactions to how Bradley Manning is allegedly being treated, and people will say, oh, I think that that's either fair or unfair, it seems important to kind of put it into context of what would be standard operating procedure for a comparable case, a comparable individual. Where does that come down?
We have a case involving military justice, so it's slightly different than when you would be talking about a civilian. However, I guess you could draw parallels, because currently there is this climate that is generating much support for, at least along the political class. I can't really speak for citizens exactly, but in looking closely at the political class of this country, you can see that from that area and within intelligence agencies and in government and in the Obama administration, you've got an unprecedented war on cracking down on leakers and going after whistleblowers. And so it seems to fit, just the way that Bradley Manning has been treated, it seems to fit within this trend.
Now, what about within the legal framework? I mean, in the sense that it was determined, and that's why Bradley Manning was given the 100-plus days credit, that he was not treated properly. Is it elaborate on that a little bit? In other words, what specifically in how he was held was determined to be inappropriate?
Well, what they were looking at were instances, for example, where a commanding officer had decided improperly that he should be sleeping every night without his underwear and have no clothing, and all he was able to use to cover himself was a suicide blanket, basically something to prevent him from harming himself. And that was deemed to have been handled improperly, so he ended up getting an award. There were times when he was placed on suicide risk, and in addition to being held in maximum custody, and the status, there was a clinical psychiatric status that he was held on called prevention of injury, and you're only supposed to be on it if you're believed to be in a state where you would harm yourself. And so on top of that, sometimes he was moved up to suicide risk, and there were multiple times where he was put on this, and the doctor said, take him off. He no longer belongs on suicide risk. And so you add up these days where he shouldn't have been confined in these conditions, and then what happens is you get the credit that was ultimately awarded. And unfortunately, the judge did not find that he had been held in conditions of solitary confinement, which I thought is something critical for people to consider, because the ACLU had a post after the ruling that showed they've been representing people who are held in solitary confinement, and Bradley Manning was kept in the exact same conditions, 23 hours a day in his cell, not able to join people for meals. He's not mixing with the group population, the general population, and so confined there and really restricted in his movement, limited time out of his cell for recreation, sometimes not even given the recreation, 20 minutes. Part of the credit actually came from the fact that he maybe should have had an hour instead of 20 minutes in many instances.
What do we know about the defense that Bradley Manning is going to mount here? In other words, what will kind of be the crux of defending himself in the trial?
Well, we know what the government doesn't want to be the defense. We know that they don't want him to talk about motive, which is why they issued a motion and the judge granted it in part so that when he's during the trial, his lawyer won't be able to say Manning had good faith when he released the documents. So it's going to be difficult to make a whistleblower defense. And I think this is something that greatly troubles people who are supporters of Bradley Manning.
Okay, so let's stop there for a second. So is it common, so I guess there's really two questions. Is it common for motive to be used in these whistleblower defenses? And number two, is it typically effective when swaying, will that sway a jury?
Well, my conclusion was that typically you would not be able to argue motive as part of your defense because the military, and I don't think it's unique to the military, it probably happens in civilian courts as well. Typically, you just have to prove that you violated the code or the law,
right,
and then that's good enough for the judge. So I don't think motive typically weighs in until sentencing, and they haven't precluded it for sentencing. So you could still talk about Bradley Manning's motive during sentencing. The only problem that I see with them being prevented from talking about motive is the fact that he's charged with this aiding the enemy offense. This federal charge is very egregious, carries the possibility of being put in prison for life without parole. And it essentially the government argues that he aided al-Qaeda indirectly by releasing the information to WikiLeaks. And it actually says that he did this to injure the United States or to advantage a foreign power. So you have to prove that he had knowledge. So this is where it's important that your listeners understand. I said granted in part because the judge said, well, during a trial, I will hear about what knowledge he would have had. Talk a little bit about his state of mind when he did engage in the alleged acts because it matters for this charge.
So summing up, what will be probably the line of defense that will be taken, the primary line of defense?
Well, the primary line is going to be, I think it's going to be that the military let Bradley Manning down. I don't necessarily think that this is a good defense, but this is what I've been hearing from his lawyer, David Coombs. Just to say that they didn't protect and practice good information security at the forward operating base Hammer, where Bradley Manning was stationed as an intelligence analyst in Baghdad, just to talk about the ways that he had mental health issues and the military was derelict in providing him care. And I guess, it's odd because because his lawyer is basically putting on a whole mitigation defense. I mean, he's not saying that Bradley Manning is not guilty. The whole entire argument I expect to be mostly about how can we get these charges thrown out.
All right, Kevin Gostola, journalist for FireDogLake.com. We will definitely check back in with you as the trial nears.
Thank you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
A hacker who goes by the name Guccifer has stolen messages, including addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, and some pictures that belong to the former President George W. Bush and his family and different members of his family. And among these items are what is in there? There's pictures of George H. Let's just go through them in a ton and see what we've got. We've got one picture here of Bill Clinton hanging out with George H.W. Bush in what seems to be kind of a private setting. We have Jeb Bush with, is that his grandchild? I don't know who it is. Okay, let's see the next one. Then we have George W. Bush posing for a picture with, is it kind of like a beret, like a French-looking version of himself, cardboard cutout? Is that what you see, Louis?
That's what it appears to be. Very bizarre.
Yeah. Let's look at the next picture. So here's George W. Bush with Giorgio Armani, just sitting kind of hanging out, and some other individual who I don't recognize. Let's look at the next picture. Here's a picture of, is this Laura and Barbara Bush hanging out? Okay, let's keep going. This is where it starts to get interesting. This is a painting drawn by George W. Bush of himself in the shower. And this is I mean, the idea, I have to say, I'm a little bit compelled by the idea of George W. Bush painting. Is this considered, what kind of paint style is this? This is not watercolor, right? Is this oil on canvas? I'm not sure what this is.
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay.
No.
So anyway, something about this is interesting, and you can kind of see his reflection in the mirror. Of course, the perspective is completely off, but he's just an amateur painter, apparently. So I was interested in this, and let's see the other one. This is George W. Bush painting himself nude in the bathtub. Of course, you only see his legs, so that's kind of just interesting to see from an ex-president. I'm fascinated by it a little bit. And then let's see the next one, Natan. And this is a picture of George W. Bush painting a church, which was taken. I have to tell you, these pictures only improve my image, my opinion of George W. Bush. It seems like, wow, the guy actually...
A bit more cultured than we thought he was.
He's slightly more cultured than I thought. And some of the emails were interesting, too, which indicate that when George H.W. Bush was in the hospital recently, people were aware that that may have been the end for George H.W. Bush, and there were emails exchanged about eulogies and about the involvement of Bill Clinton in George H.W. Bush's funeral as well, because they have become such close friends. And I actually if the intention was just to do something, that was accomplished. If the intention was to make the Bush family look bad, this, if anything, makes them seem more like actual real people. And I don't know. That was my reaction when I saw this stuff.
Yeah, I had no idea that there was an artistic side to George Bush. Fascinating.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go to voicemail. Our voicemail line is open 24 hours a day. 219-2-DAVID-P is the phone number. First, a voicemail about LAPD manhunt for Chris Dorner. Let's take a listen to that one.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, I've been watching your videos on YouTube quite a bit, and I just want to know why your show is not reporting anything on this Chris Dorner thing. I think, in my opinion, it's because he doesn't fit your profile on what these shooters are. I think if he was white and conservative, you guys would be all over it. That's just my opinion.
Okay,
all
well,
right.
It is just your opinion, and it just so happens to be completely free of any fact. So the reality is, when we were last on the air at 2 p.m. on Thursday, last Thursday, February 7th, that was. And at that time, here's the thing. When we go to plan a show, there's usually like 10 to 20 different shooting-related violence, manhunt, car chase stories that we look at. And we try to pick the ones that let us make some kind of a broader commentary or have some interesting analysis. At that time, the Dorner story was one of those 20, and it wasn't clear that it was going to become what it became. We haven't been on the air since then, and it was our first story today. So that's what it is, Lewis. I mean, I don't know how else I can respond to this voicemail.
No, it just, we didn't even have a whole lot of info on it. What could you do?
All right, and here's another voicemail coming in from Florida.
Hey, David, Lewis, Natan. It's TJ calling from Tampa, Florida. I'm 22 years old. I attend university here in Florida.
Okay.
And I'll be graduating soon. I was turned on to your show about maybe a year and a half ago, kind of referred here by the Best of the Left podcast. And now it's you guys and the Young Turks who make up the bulk of my news.
Wow.
And analysis. And, as I've listened to the show, I've grown to love it more, get to know you guys better. And, I just appreciate all the work you do, the voices you provide, the perspectives. It's come to shape my mind, and just want to thank you guys and tell you guys to keep it up.
So the next voicemail will be from a concerned mom saying that people in colleges' minds are being shaped by the left-wing propaganda on the David Pakman Show.
That's fine. I just worry about people's minds being shaped by you. I mean, that's terrifying.
Okay, what do you mean?
Relax. I'm just kidding.
Right. So, more since I've mentioned that we get very few positive voicemails, we've been getting more positive voicemails.
Mm-hmm. I just hope people don't start adopting your hairstyle.
No, and people should know that this is an opinion program. This is not a news reporting program. I say that both to people who criticize us and... Is something moving over there, Lewis? Is everything okay?
We're good.
It really looked like that box on your desk just moved completely on its own.
That's because my headphone wire...
For a second I thought I was literally seeing things, and I was about to jump on Lewis's Paranormal Stuff Exists bandwagon.
Keep going.
In any case, whether you like or dislike the show, you should understand it's an opinion show, not a news reporting show. And on that note, Lewis, today's bonus show, fantastic bonus show. We're going to talk about a national coffee emergency that is taking place. And we will also talk about, this is a really interesting story, broader implications. The next Xbox will not allow used games. What does this mean for copyright? What if this was applied to movies? This is a concerning thing. DavidPakman.com/membership. Not only do you get the bonus show, you support this show. Very important. See you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.